"This is a mistake," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the opulent silence of his penthouse. The city lights of Seoul glittered like a fallen galaxy below, but inside, the world had shrunk to the space between them. "We can't." Kang Dae-hyun felt the words like a physical blow, each one a shard of ice lodging itself in his chest. He watched her, Imani, the woman who had somehow become the axis on which his world now turned. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette a stark, beautiful shadow against the brilliant backdrop of his kingdom. A kingdom built on fear and shadows, a legacy he wore like a shroud. "Don't say that," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. It was a command, not a plea. He didn't know how to plead. "It's the truth," she countered, turning to face him. Her eyes, usually so full of life and a defiant spark he adored, were now clouded with a sorrow that mirrored his own. "Look at this. Look at you. This life. It's not me. I can't breathe here, Dae-hyun. It feels like drowning." He took a step towards her, his hands clenching at his sides, fighting the instinct to just pull her into his arms and hold her until the world outside ceased to exist. But he knew it was that very world that was pushing her away, the world he commanded, the world he was. "I can protect you," he insisted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He could protect her from anything, from anyone, except himself. A sad, brittle laugh escaped her. "Protect me from what? From your father? From your rivals? Or from the man who has to order someone's ruin before breakfast? I don't want to be protected, Dae-hyun. I want to be good. I want my life to be simple and good." He had no answer for that. Goodness was a foreign country he had only ever glimpsed through her eyes. She picked up her worn canvas bag from the polished marble floor, the simple object looking profoundly out of place amidst the calculated luxury. It was a symbol of her world, the one he had so desperately wanted to pull her from, the one she was now clinging to like a life raft. "I have to go," she said, her voice finally breaking. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, and he had the insane urge to catch it, to preserve it, a testament to the fact that she had felt something for him, too. He stood frozen, a king in his castle, utterly powerless as his greatest treasure walked away. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her, to lock the door, to command her to stay. But the part of him that she had unearthed, the part that was more man than monster, knew he had to let her go. To keep her would be to destroy her. "Imani," he breathed, her name a prayer and a curse on his lips. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle, but she didn't look back. "Goodbye, Dae-hyun." The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous apartment like a gunshot. It was the sound of his world breaking. He stood alone, surrounded by the glittering, empty trappings of his power. And for the first time in his life, Kang Dae-hyun felt truly, devastatingly poor. 3 months earlier, he had been a different man. Not a better one, just one who was blissfully unaware of the void inside him. He had been sitting in the private room of a high-end restaurant in Gangnam, the air thick with the cloying scent of expensive perfume and unspoken threats. The meeting was a tedious necessity, a parley with a lesser organization looking to pay tribute to his family's syndicate, the Changsa Group. They weren't in shipping, not really. They moved whatever paid best, and they ensured the paths were always clear. Tae-hyun was the head, the chairman's son, the heir apparent who had long since taken the reins. His father, Chairman Kang, believed in shows of force. Tae-hyun believed in efficiency. This meeting was inefficient. The man across from him, a paunchy fool named Park, was sweating, his words fawning and empty. Tae-hyun let his gaze drift, his mind already calculating the logistics of a new shipment coming through Busan. He was bored, utterly and profoundly bored. This was his life, a rotation of sterile boardrooms, tense negotiations in hushed restaurants, and the quiet, crushing weight of 100 lives held in the palm of his hand. He felt nothing. Not excitement, not fear, not even satisfaction. Just a dull, persistent ache of loneliness he refused to name. His lieutenant and only friend, Min-jun, sat beside him, his posture rigid, his eyes missing nothing. He caught Dae-hyun's wandering attention and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Pay attention. Dae-hyun ignored him. His gaze fell upon one of the waitstaff, a woman moving with a fluid grace that seemed out of place among the stiff, formal servers. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, not in the way of the women who typically threw themselves at him. Her hair was a cloud of intricate braids, her skin the color of rich coffee. But it was her eyes that snared him. They were intelligent, weary, and held a spark of something he couldn't quite define. Defiance, maybe. Resilience. It was a frozen moment. The clatter and drone of the restaurant faded into a dull hum. The world narrowed to her. He watched as she dealt with a demanding customer at a nearby table, her smile polite, but her eyes betraying a deep-seated exhaustion. He felt a strange, unwelcome pang in his chest. It felt like recognition. He saw the same trapped feeling he carried within himself, only hers was born of circumstance, not of blood and duty. "Mr. Kang?" Park's reedy voice broke the spell. Dae-hyun's head snapped back, his expression hardening into its usual cold mask. "You were saying?" The man flinched. "Just that we are honored, truly honored, to be in partnership." Dae-hyun waved a dismissive hand, his patience gone. One of his own men, a brutish underling named Choi, laughed cruelly. "He's boring the chairman's son, Park. Get to the point or get out." The waitress, his waitress, approached their table then, a tray balanced perfectly on her palm. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of long hours and tired feet. "Your drinks, gentlemen." Choi, puffed up with his own minor authority, didn't even look at her. He reached for his glass and knocked it over, sending whiskey and ice spilling across the pristine white tablecloth. The liquid splashed onto her apron. "Clumsy girl," Choi sneered. "Watch what you're doing." The woman didn't flinch. She simply placed the other drinks down, her expression unreadable. "My apologies, sir. I'll bring a cloth to clean that up." Her calm infuriated Choi further. "Apologies? You should be on your knees cleaning my shoes. They almost got wet." That was it. The disrespect, the tedious posturing, the sheer ugliness of it all coalesced into a cold rage inside Dae-hyun. He was about to rise, to end the meeting and deal with Choi later in a much more permanent fashion. This entire evening was a waste of his time. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping harshly against the floor. "We're done here," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The entire room went silent. He stood ready to storm out, to leave them all to stew in their own mediocrity. He didn't spare the waitress another glance. She was just part of the ugly scenery. And then she spoke. Not in English, as all the staff were required to do in this international hotspot. Not in the deferential tone he expected. She spoke in perfect colloquial Korean, her voice soft but clear, edged with an unmistakable note of exasperation. "사실, 저기요, 선생님의 성화락이 잔을 쳤습니다." "Actually, sir, your own finger knocked over the glass." Dae-hyun froze. His entire body went rigid. He turned slowly, his eyes locking onto her. The world, which had started to spin back up to its normal, dreary speed, came to a dead halt once more. A black woman, in Seoul, speaking flawless, casual Korean, not the stilted textbook phrases of a student, but the easy, confident cadence of a native. She had even used the correct, slightly informal honorifics, a nuance that took years to master. Choi was gaping at her, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Park looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Even Minjun's stoic composure had cracked, his eyebrows raised in astonishment. But Daehyun saw only her. She met his gaze, and for a split second, a flicker of panic crossed her face. She had spoken out of turn, broken protocol in the most unexpected way possible. She probably thought she was about to be fired, or worse, given the company she was in. He saw the spark again, brighter this time. It was courage. A slow, unfamiliar sensation spread through his chest. It took him a moment to identify it. It was amusement. A genuine, startling amusement that threatened to curve his lips into a smile. A facial expression so foreign, it would have sent his subordinates into a panic. He held her gaze for a long moment, an entire silent conversation passing between them. Then, he turned his head and looked at the sputtering Choi. "She's right," Daehyun said, his voice calm again, but with a new, strange lightness to it. "It was your finger. Clean up your own mess." He gestured to the spill. "And apologize to the lady." Choi's jaw dropped. "Sir?" "Now." The single word was laced with steel. Trembling, Choi bowed his head towards her. My apologies." Daehyun turned his attention back to her. He took in her name tag for the first time. Imani. A beautiful name. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and extracted not a few bills, but the entire contents. He placed the thick stack of 50,000 won notes on the table, a sum that would likely equal her salary for several months. "For the inconvenience," he said, his voice soft, intended for her alone. Then he turned and walked out, Minjun following silently in his wake. He didn't look back, but he could feel her eyes on him, a burning point of heat on his skin. The boring gray world he had woken up in that morning was suddenly, irrevocably, shot through with color. And Kang Daehyun, a man who had everything and wanted nothing, finally found something he wanted. Imani stared at the stack of money on the table, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind of shock, fear, and a bewildering sense of triumph. What did I just do? She had been working at La Ciel, one of Seoul's most pretentious dining establishments, for 6 months. It was a soul-crushing job, but it paid the bills, or at least a fraction of them. Her student loans from her art degree felt like a mountain she would be climbing for the rest of her life. Here, she was an exotic accessory, the black waitress who could speak passable English to the tourists and expats. No one knew about her Korean. She had learned it as a child. Her father had been stationed at Yongsan Garrison for over a decade, and she'd grown up playing with the neighborhood kids, absorbing the language as easily as she breathed the city's smoggy air. It was a part of her, a secret piece of her history she kept tucked away. It was hers. Until tonight. The man, the one they all deferred to with a terrifying reverence, had an aura of power so dense it was almost visible. He was lethally handsome, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything, and a mouth that looked like it had never formed a smile. When his underling had been so vile, something inside her had snapped. The years of biting her tongue, of smiling through casual racism and blatant disrespect, had boiled over. The Korean had just slipped out, an act of pure, unthinking rebellion. And the man, the dangerous, beautiful man, hadn't been angry. He had been intrigued. The look in his eyes when he'd turned back to her was not the look of a crime boss about to have a problematic waitress fired. It was something else entirely. Something more personal, more intense. It scared her more than his anger would have. Her manager, Mr. Kim, scurried over, his face pale. "Imani, see, what happened? They left." She gestured numbly to the money. He left a tip." Mr. Kim's eyes bulged. He looked from the money to her and back again, his mind clearly struggling to compute the scene. The other men at the table were scrambling to their feet, throwing money down to cover the bill and practically running out of the restaurant. leaving the spilled drink and their wounded pride behind. "All of that? For you?" he whispered in awe. "I guess so," she said, her voice faint. She didn't want the money. It felt dirty. It felt like a brand, a claim. Later that night, back in the tiny apartment she shared with her best friend Chloe, she recounted the story. Chloe, a fellow expat who taught English, was perched on their lumpy sofa, her eyes wide. "So, let me get this straight," Chloe said, munching on a chip. "You sassed a Korean mob boss, in Korean, and instead of having you whacked, he defended you and left you a tip the size of our rent for the next 6 months?" Imani cringed, dropping her head into her hands. "When you say it like that, it sounds insane." "It is insane! It's the plot of a K-drama, Imani! You are the plucky heroine who captures the heart of the cold, chaebol heir with a dark secret. He's not a chaebol heir, Chloe. He's a gangster. There were tattoos peeking out from his cuffs. And the way those other men looked at him, they were terrified." She shuddered, remembering the cold authority in his voice. "Okay, so a gangster kingpin. Even better, more dramatic." Chloe leaned forward, her expression serious for once. "But seriously, are you okay? That must have been terrifying." Imani sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. The terrifying part wasn't the guy who spilled the drink. It was the other one, the quiet one. The way he looked at me? She trailed off, unable to articulate the feeling. It was like being seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. And the person seeing her was someone she should absolutely run from. "Well, you've got a crazy story and a fat bank account now," Chloe said, trying to be cheerful. "Just lay low. It's a big city. You'll never see him again." Imani wanted to believe that. She desperately wanted to believe that. But the next day, a delivery arrived at the restaurant. It was a ridiculously large bouquet of white orchids, so many that they barely fit through the door. The card had no message, just a single, exquisitely drawn character. Kang. The other waitresses buzzed with envy and speculation. Imani felt a cold dread snake down her spine. He knew her name. And now, he knew where she worked. Chloe's K-drama fantasy was starting to feel a lot more like a horror movie. Daehyun was not a man given to whimsy. His life was a series of calculated moves, of risks assessed and assets managed. Yet, for the past 48 hours, his mind had been occupied by a waitress named Imani. He had Min-jun run a background check. It was a standard, invasive procedure he'd ordered 1,000 times before for potential partners or threats. This time, it felt different. It felt like a violation. The file was thin. Imani Williams, American citizen, father in the U.S. military, stationed in Korea for 12 years, art school graduate, crushing student debt, no family in Korea, lived a quiet, unremarkable life, except for the fire in her eyes and a tongue that spoke his language like a native. "She's clean, sir," Min-jun reported, standing before Daehyun's desk in his sprawling office overlooking the Han River. "No affiliations, no trouble. Just a girl trying to make ends meet." Daehyun stared out the window, his fingers steepled. "She's not just a girl." Min-jun remained silent, a sign of his tacit agreement. He had seen it too. "The orchids were delivered," Daehyun said, more to himself than to his lieutenant. "A bit ostentatious, sir, for a first move," Min-jun ventured, ever the pragmatist. Daehyun almost smiled. "She's not a woman who would be impressed by subtlety. She'd dismiss it. This is harder to ignore." He wanted to be ignored. That was the irony. For his entire adult life, he had cultivated an aura that made people shrink away, that made them want to be invisible. But with her, he found himself craving the opposite. He wanted her to see him. Not the chairman's son, not the head of the Jangsa syndicate, just him, a man. It was a foolish, dangerous thought. "What are your intentions, Daehyun?" Min-jun asked, his tone shifting from subordinate to friend. They had grown up together, Minjun the son of his father's most trusted bodyguard. He was the only person who could speak to Daehyun this way. "I intend to see her again," Daehyun stated simply. "Is that wise? Bringing someone like her into our world?" "I have no intention of bringing her into my world," Daehyun cut him off, his voice sharp. "I just want to be in hers for a little while." Even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. His world was not a coat he could take off at the door. It was tattooed onto his skin, woven into his DNA. But the pull towards her was a gravitational force he was unwilling to fight. So he did what he always did when he wanted something. He pursued it with relentless, single-minded focus. He started showing up at the restaurant. Not at a table. That would be too obvious, too intimidating. He would sit at the small, overlooked bar, nursing a single glass of whiskey for hours, just to watch her work. He learned the rhythm of her movements, the way her polite smile didn't quite reach her eyes until a coworker made her laugh, the way she would rub her lower back when she thought no one was looking. He was studying her, and he hated himself for it. It was the same way he studied an enemy, looking for weaknesses, for patterns. But with her, he was looking for glimpses of light. Imani was acutely aware of his presence. It was like a change in the atmospheric pressure every time he walked in. He never approached her, never spoke. He just sat there, a silent, brooding statue of a man in a perfectly tailored suit, his gaze a physical weight on her. It was creepy. It was terrifying. And it was, to her absolute horror, a little bit thrilling. "He's here again," she hissed to Chloe over the phone during her break, huddled in the alley behind the kitchen. "The K-drama gangster? At the bar?" "Yes, he just sits there, Chloe. He stares. It's like he's waiting for something. What am I supposed to do?" "Well, you can't exactly call the cops and say, 'A handsome, ridiculously wealthy man is quietly patronizing my workplace.' They'd laugh you out of the station." "This isn't funny!" Okay. Look, maybe you should just confront him," Chloe suggested. "Walk up and ask him what he wants. Call his bluff." The thought sent a jolt of pure terror through Imani. Confront him? The man who had made his associate apologize with a single word? Are you crazy? "I'm not confronting him." "Then you have to live with the super hot, super scary stalker. Your choice." The opportunity, or perhaps the inevitable confrontation, came a week later. A torrential summer rainstorm had broken over Seoul, turning the streets into rivers. Imani's shift ended late, and she stood under the restaurant's meager awning, watching the downpour, knowing the bus would be a nightmare. Her umbrella was a cheap, flimsy thing that would be turned inside out in a second. A sleek black sedan, the kind that whispered of unimaginable wealth and power, pulled up to the curb in front of her. The back window glided down silently. It was him, Kang Daehyun. "You need a ride," he said. It wasn't a question. Imani's heart leaped into her throat. This was it, the moment she had been dreading and, on some deep, unacknowledged level, anticipating. "No, thank you," she said, her voice tight. "I'm fine." "You are not fine. You are getting soaked and the buses are delayed. Get in the car, Imani." He knew her name. He had said her name. Hearing it in his deep voice did something strange to her insides. "This is creepy," she blurted out, the words escaping before she could stop them. "The flowers, the sitting at the bar, it's creepy and I want you to stop." He didn't look offended. He looked patient. "Is it illegal?" "Is what illegal?" she asked, bewildered. "Sending flowers, sitting in a public establishment, offering a ride to someone in a storm?" He tilted his head. "Is any of that illegal?" "No, but—" "Then get in the car," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I will not harm you. I just want to make sure you get home safely." She hesitated, the rain plastering her thin work uniform to her skin. She was cold, tired, and defeated. He was offering a warm, dry car. It was a simple transaction, but she knew it wasn't simple at all. Getting in that car was crossing a line, but standing in the rain felt like surrendering to the misery her life currently was. Getting in the car felt, however foolishly, like taking a chance. With a deep, shaky breath, she pulled the door open and slid inside. The interior smelled of leather and something else, a clean, masculine scent that was just him. The door shut, encasing them in a bubble of profound silence, the roar of the storm instantly muted. This was a mistake, a terrible, wonderful mistake. The silence in the car was heavier than any conversation. Daehyun gave the driver her address, a piece of information he already knew, but pretended to be hearing for the first time. He felt her sitting beside him, her presence a vibrant, nervous energy that filled the small space. He could smell the rain on her clothes and the faint, sweet scent of her skin. It was intoxicating. He had to say something. He had orchestrated this moment with the precision of a military campaign, and now he was as tongue-tied as a schoolboy. "Why did you learn Korean?" he asked, the question abrupt. Imani seemed startled by the directness. She shifted, turning to look at him. In the dim light of the car, her eyes were wide and luminous. "My father was in the army. We lived here for most of my childhood. I grew up with it." It was a simple explanation, but it explained so much. She wasn't a tourist. This place was a part of her. "And you came back?" "I had to," she said, her voice dropping. After my father passed away, things were difficult. I had a degree I couldn't use and debt I couldn't pay. I thought maybe I could find work here as a translator or something. It didn't quite work out that way." He heard the story she wasn't telling, the story of struggle, of disappointment, of dreams deferred. It resonated with a part of him he kept locked away. His own dreams, whatever they might have been, had died the day his older brother had been killed, the day his father had placed the heavy mantle of the family's legacy on his shoulders. "You are an artist?" he asked, remembering the detail from Minjun's file. She gave a short, bitter laugh. "I was. Now I'm a waitress who remembers how to hold a paintbrush." "I would like to see your art," he said, the words coming out before he could think them through. She stared at him, her suspicion warring with a flicker of something else. Pride, maybe. "Why? So you can buy it all up like you tried to buy my apology with that tip?" Her words were sharp as broken glass. He deserved it. "The money was not for your apology," he said, his voice low and earnest. He turned to face her more fully. "It was for your courage, and I was apologizing for the behavior of my associate." This seemed to disarm her. She looked away, out at the rain-streaked streets. "People like you don't apologize." "People like me?" "Rich, powerful," she said, her voice laced with a lifetime of resentment for a world that had always been out of her reach. "You don't see people like me. We're furniture." "I see you, Imani," he said, and the truth of the statement hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. "From the first moment I saw you, you are all I have seen." The car fell silent again, but this time it was different. It was charged, electric. The air was thick with unspoken things, with the terrifying, thrilling possibility of what was happening between them. When the car pulled up to her run-down apartment building, the rain had softened to a drizzle. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Why are you doing this?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" He searched for an answer that was both true and safe, but he couldn't find one. The truth was too dangerous, so he settled for a part of it. "I don't know," he admitted, the vulnerability of the confession feeling raw and foreign on his tongue. "I only know that my life is quiet, and you are not. When you spoke Korean in that restaurant, it was the first interesting thing that had happened to me in years." She looked at him then, truly looked at him, and he saw the walls around her begin to crumble just a little. She saw past the suit, past the power, and saw the profound loneliness he lived in. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Kang," she said softly, her hand on the door handle. "Dae-hyun," he corrected her. "My name is Dae-hyun." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and got out of the car. He watched her run up the steps and disappear into the building, a small, resilient figure against the vast, indifferent city. He didn't leave. He waited, his eyes fixed on a second-floor window until a light flickered on. Only then did he nod to his driver. As the car pulled away, Taehyun felt a fissure crack through the frozen landscape of his soul. It was hope, and it terrified him more than any rival or threat he had ever faced. Imani leaned against her apartment door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her heart was doing a frantic, chaotic dance in her chest. "You're home late," Chloe called from the kitchen. "Did you get caught in the—" Whoa! She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel, and stopped short, taking in Imani's disheveled state. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Or kissed one." "He gave me a ride home," Imani said, her voice a squeak. Chloe's eyes widened. "K-drama gangster gave you a ride? In the evil-looking black car?" "It's not evil-looking, it's just black," Imani mumbled, sliding down the door to sit on the floor. She buried her face in her hands. "Oh my God, Chloe, I think I'm in trouble." "The good kind, or the we need to pack a bag and flee the country kind?" "I don't know." Imani's voice was muffled by her hands. "He's not what I expected." She explained what had happened in the car, the questions, the confession of his loneliness, the way he had looked at her. "He said I was the first interesting thing that had happened to him in years," she finished, her voice full of wonder. Chloe sat down on the floor opposite her. "Okay, this has officially gone beyond a fun anecdote. This is real. He's pursuing you, Imani." "But why? Look at me. I'm broke, I'm exhausted, I serve entitled rich people for a living. He could have anyone." "Maybe that's the point," Chloe said gently. "Maybe he's tired of the women he can have. He wants the one he has to work for, the one who isn't impressed by his money, the one who calls him creepy to his face." A reluctant smile touched Imani's lips. "I did do that, didn't I?" "You did, and he's still here. That means something." Chloe paused, her expression turning serious. "But you have to be careful, Imani. Guys like that, their lives are complicated and dangerous. Are you prepared for that?" The question hung in the air. Was she? Her life was hard, but it was simple. It was hers. Getting involved with Dae-hyun meant stepping into a world she couldn't begin to comprehend, a world of shadows and power plays she had only ever seen in movies. But then she remembered the look in his eyes, the profound, aching loneliness that seemed to call to a similar emptiness in her own heart. She had spent her whole life feeling like an outsider, a person caught between two cultures, belonging to neither. In his gaze, she had felt, for a terrifying moment, like she was home. The pursuit intensified, but it also changed. He stopped coming to the restaurant. The silent observation was replaced by direct invitations. A text message from an unknown number. "There is a gallery opening in Insadong. They are featuring a modern inkwash painter. I thought you might be interested. I will be there at 7. She told herself she wouldn't go. It was crazy. It was dangerous. At 7:15, she found herself standing outside the gallery, her heart pounding. She went inside. He was there, standing before a large canvas of black ink bleeding into white space. He wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at her. He wore simple black trousers and a soft gray sweater. No suit, no tie. He looked younger, more approachable. He looked devastatingly handsome. "You came," he said, a real, genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time. It was like a punch to the chest. "The painter is a favorite of mine," she lied, though she had looked him up and been captivated by his work. They walked through the gallery together. He didn't talk about business or power. He asked her about the art. He listened, truly listened, as she spoke about brushstrokes, about the use of negative space, about the emotion conveyed in a single line. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and his focus on her was absolute. It was on that night, standing in front of a painting of a lone bird taking flight, that he reached out and gently took her hand. His fingers laced through hers, his palm warm and strong. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a vow, a claim. Imani's breath hitched. She should have pulled away. She should have run. She didn't. She held on tighter. Their dates, if they could be called that, continued in this vein. They never went anywhere flashy or expensive. He took her to hole-in-the-wall noodle shops he remembered from his youth, to quiet temples on the outskirts of the city, to walk along the Cheonggye-cheon stream late at night. He was showing her a side of himself that he kept hidden from the world, the man beneath the armor. And Imani found herself falling. Hard. She was falling for the way he listened, the way his eyes would soften when she talked about her dreams of painting again, the way he would instinctively position himself between her and any perceived threat on the street. She was falling for his quiet intensity, his surprising gentleness, the deep well of loneliness in him that she longed to fill. One evening, after a long walk, he drove her home. He walked her to the door of her building, the silence between them comfortable now, familiar. "I bought you something," he said, his voice hesitant. He handed her a long, flat package. She unwrapped it carefully. It was a professional-grade set of artists' canvases and a full collection of expensive oil paints and brushes. It was an extravagant gift, but it wasn't like the orchids. This was personal. This was a message. "I see you. I see your dreams." Tears pricked her eyes. "Daehyun, this is too much." "It is not enough," he said, his voice a low rumble. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. His thumbs gently stroked her cheeks. "Paint again, Imani, for yourself, and one day, for me." The space between them vanished. He lowered his head, and his lips met hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate, hungry, filled with all the unspoken words, the pent-up longing, the terror and the hope of the past few weeks. It was a drowning, a fire, a coming home. Imani's hands came up to clutch his shirt, her body melting against his. She kissed him back with a ferocity that matched his own, pouring all her fear and confusion and burgeoning love into the act. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I want you," he whispered, the words raw with an emotion he could no longer contain. "I know I should not. I know I am no good for you. But I want you." "I know," she whispered back, her own voice trembling. "I know." It was a confession. It was a surrender. In that moment, standing in the dingy hallway of her apartment building, Imani knew she was lost. She had stepped off the edge, and she was falling straight into the arms of a man who was both her salvation and her damnation. But the life he led could not be kept at bay forever. The shadows were patient, and they were closing in. A week later, Imani was leaving her late shift when two large, menacing men blocked her path in the alley. They weren't from Daehyun's circle. Their clothes were cheaper, their eyes colder, more feral. "You're Kang Daehyun's girl," the first one said in rough Korean, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Imani's blood ran cold. "I don't know who you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," the second one sneered, stepping closer. "He's been making a lot of noise lately, stepping on toes. We're here to send a message. A message he'll understand." Before she could scream, A blur of motion erupted from the darkness. Minjun appeared as if from nowhere, moving with a brutal, terrifying efficiency. There was a sickening crack of bone, a grunt of pain, and in seconds, both men were groaning on the wet pavement. Minjun stood over them, his suit immaculate, his expression grim. He looked at Imani, his eyes full of a weary pity. "The chairman's son apologizes," he said formally. "This should not have happened. You are safe now." Imani stared at him, her body trembling uncontrollably. Safe? She had never felt less safe in her entire life. The fantasy she had been living in, the sweet dates and the soul-bearing conversations, shattered into a million pieces. This was the reality. This was Daehyun's world, and it had finally reached out and touched her. "Take me to him," she said, her voice a dead, hollow thing. "Now." Daehyun was in his office when Minjun called. The single sentence, "There was an incident with Imanishi. She is safe. She wants to see you," sent a spike of ice-cold dread through his veins. He had failed. He had promised himself he would keep his world from touching her, and he had failed. When she walked into his office, she looked small and fragile in the vast, imposing space. But her eyes were blazing with a cold fire he had never seen before. She didn't look at the expensive furniture or the panoramic view. She looked only at him. "Tell me," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "Tell me everything. No more lies. No more half-truths. What are you?" This was the moment he had been dreading since he'd first laid eyes on her. The moment the dream would have to face the brutal light of reality. He could lie. He could soften it, sanitize it. But he owed her more than that. He owed her the truth, no matter the cost. He walked over to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, his hands unsteady for the first time in years. He handed one to her. Her fingers brushed his, and the small contact felt like an electric shock. "My family," he began, his voice heavy. "We are not in the import/export business, not in the way you would understand." He told her everything. He told her about the Jangsa Group, a syndicate his grandfather had built from the rubble of the war. He told her about the nature of their business, not just shipping, but racketeering, illegal lending, and the violent enforcement of their own brand of order in the city's underworld. He told her about his father, a ruthless traditionalist who believed in power above all else. He told her about his brother, the original heir, who had been murdered by a rival family, thrusting Daehyun into a role he never wanted. "My hands are not clean, Imani," he said, his gaze locked on hers, forcing her to see the ugliness he lived with every day. "I have done things. I have made decisions that have ruined lives. It is the price of this position, the price of keeping my family, my people, safe." He watched her face as he spoke, searching for the revulsion, the disgust he knew he would find. And he did. He saw it in the way her knuckles whitened around her glass, in the slight tremor of her lip. But he saw something else, too. Pain. A deep, profound sorrow. She was not just horrified by him. She was mourning the man she thought he was, the man he might have been. "Those men tonight," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "A rival faction, the Park clan, the fools I was meeting with the night I first saw you. They thought to use you to send me a message." A muscle jumped in his jaw. His rage was a living thing, a cold beast in his chest. They would pay for this. They would pay dearly. Imani closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. The same path he had watched in his mind's eye 100 times. "I can't," she whispered, setting her untouched glass down on the desk. I don't want to be protected, Daehyun. I want to be good. I want my life to be simple and good. Simple. Good. Two words that had no place in his world. He had tried to build a small island of peace for them, but the dark ocean of his life had overwhelmed it. She picked up her worn canvas bag, the symbol of her world, the world he could not enter and she could not leave. I have to go, she said, her voice finally breaking. He was frozen, a statue of power and regret. To keep her would be to cage her, to tarnish her until she was as gray as his own soul. The only act of love he could offer her was to let her walk away. Imani. He breathed her name, a final, desperate prayer. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For one agonizing second, he thought she might turn back. But she didn't. Goodbye, Daehyun. The door clicked shut. The sound was the end of everything. He was alone with the ghost of her, the ghost of the man he might have been. He walked to his desk and picked up the whiskey glass she had left behind. Her fingerprint was a small, perfect smudge on the crystal. He stared at it, the only thing she had left behind, until the city lights blurred into a meaningless smear of color through his own unshed tears. Life without Daehyun was quiet. It was safe, and it was utterly, devastatingly gray. Imani went back to her routine at the restaurant, to the long hours and the tired feet and the polite, empty smiles. But the color he had brought into her world was gone, leaving everything muted, washed out. She tried to paint. She set up the easel he had bought her, squeezed the vibrant paints onto a palette. But when she faced the blank canvas, her mind was empty. The inspiration, the spark he had so effortlessly ignited, was gone. The expensive paints just seemed to mock her. You've barely said a word in a week, Chloe said one night, watching Imani listlessly push food around her plate. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about, Imani said, her voice flat. It's over. I did the right thing. Did you? Chloe asked gently. Because you look miserable. You look more broken now than when you were complaining about being broke. A sob caught in Imani's throat. I couldn't stay, Chloe. His world, it's violent. It's built on fear. I saw the man he has to be, and it terrified me. But what about the man he is with you? That was the question that haunted her waking moments and tormented her dreams. The man he was with her was gentle, attentive, and vulnerable. He was a man who listened to her talk about art, who found joy in a simple bowl of noodles, whose smile was a rare and precious gift. She had fallen in love with that man. But that man came with the other one, the kingpin, the monster. They're the same person, Imani whispered. I can't have one without the other. She missed him with an ache that was physical. She found herself scanning the street for his black car, her heart leaping at the sight of any man in a well-tailored suit. Every corner of the city reminded her of him, the gallery, the temple, the stream. He had woven himself into the fabric of her life, and now that he was gone, everything was unraveling. She was safe, but she felt more lost than ever. Daehyun's world, once merely quiet and orderly, was now a silent, monochrome hell. Her absence was a physical presence, a ghost that sat beside him in his car, that stood behind him as he stared out his office window. He plunged himself into his work, but the purpose was gone. The power he wielded felt like a dead weight in his hands. His rage, however, was sharper than ever. He dismantled the Park clan with a cold, surgical brutality that shocked even his most hardened men. It wasn't about business, it was punishment. It was a primal scream of fury at a world that had taken the one good thing in his life from him. His father, Chairman Kang, summoned him. The old man sat in his traditional house, surrounded by antiques and the scent of old paper and old power. You have been reckless, the chairman said, his voice a dry rasp. This move against the parks was sloppy, sentimental. It was not about business. It was about some girl. Dae-hyun met his father's cold gaze without flinching. "Do not speak of her." "A foreigner," the chairman scoffed. "You risk our empire, our legacy, for a waitress? You dishonor your brother's memory." Something inside Dae-hyun, something that had been cracking for months, finally broke. "Honor?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "You speak of honor? This life you forced on me, this empire of fear and blood money, has no honor. My brother is dead because of it. I am dead because of it. I have pushed away the only person who ever made me feel alive because of it." He stood, his fists clenched. "I am done honoring it." He turned and walked out, leaving his father speechless for the first time in his life. The realization had hit him with the force of a physical blow. He didn't just want Imani back. He wanted to be a man worthy of her. And the man he was now, the man his father had made him, was not. He couldn't ask her to accept his world. So he would have to change it. The decision was terrifying. It was an earthquake that would bring his entire life crashing down. It would make him enemies, not just outside the family, but within it. His father would fight him. His uncles, his cousins, all the men who profited from the darkness, would see him as a traitor. He found Minjun waiting for him by the car. His friend's face was grim. He had heard everything. "What you are thinking of doing," Minjun said quietly, "it may be impossible. It could get you killed." "Living without her is already a kind of death," Dae-hyun replied, his eyes fixed on the distant city skyline. "This syndicate, it needs to change, to become legitimate. No more shadows, a real corporation. It will take years. It will be a war." Minjun was silent for a long moment. Then he straightened his tie, a gesture of settling into a decision. "Then we had better get started. Where do we begin, sir?" Dae-hyun looked at his friend, his brother in all but blood, and felt the first flicker of hope he'd had since she'd walked out his door. "We begin by cutting out the rot." It was a grand gesture, born of desperation and love. It was a declaration of war on his own past, on his own identity. He didn't know if it would work. He didn't know if he would survive it. And he didn't know, even if he did, if she would ever take him back. But for the first time in a very long time, Kang Dae-hyun had a reason to fight. He wasn't fighting for power or for money. He was fighting for a chance at a simple, good life. He was fighting for her. Over the next 2 months, the city's underworld was thrown into chaos. News reports spoke of a massive internal restructuring within the powerful, shadowy Jangsa group. Key figures were forced out. Certain subsidiaries were shut down overnight. Dae-hyun was liquidating the darkest parts of his empire, absorbing the financial losses, and using the capital to invest in legitimate, verifiable businesses. Tech startups, real estate development, green energy. He was burning his kingdom to the ground to build a new one from the ashes. Imani saw the news reports. Her Korean was fluent enough to read between the lines of the business journals. She saw his name, Kang Dae-hyun, associated with a bold, almost reckless corporate pivot. The articles spoke of a visionary new leader dragging a conservative old company into the 21st century. She knew the truth. It was a war. He was doing it. He was changing his world for her. The knowledge was a heavy, breathtaking weight in her chest. The fear she had felt was replaced by a wave of awe and a love so fierce it stole her breath. He wasn't asking her to step into the darkness. He was trying to step into the light. One rainy evening, 2 months after she had left him, there was a knock on her apartment door. Her heart stopped. She knew, somehow, she just knew it was him. She opened the door. He stood there, looking tired, thinner, but more alive than she had ever seen him. He wore a simple jacket, soaked through with rain. The armor was gone. It was just him, Dae-hyun. He didn't speak, he just looked at her, his eyes asking 1,000 questions. "I saw the news," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not finished," he said, his voice rough. "It will take a long time. It's still dangerous, but it's a start. It's a promise." He wasn't promising her riches or an easy life. He was promising her an honest one. "You're an idiot," she said, a tearful laugh bubbling up from her chest. "A crazy, reckless idiot." "I know," he said, a small, weary smile touching his lips. She didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around his neck and pulled his face down to hers. The reunion kiss was not like the first one. It was not born of desperation and discovery. It was a kiss of relief, of recognition, of a promise finally kept. It was rain and tears and the taste of home. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off her feet, holding her as if he would never let her go again. He buried his face in her neck, his body trembling with the strain of the last few months. "Is it enough?" he whispered against her skin. "Am I enough?" She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes, her hands framing his face. "It's more than enough," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You were always enough." 1 year later, Imani stood in a bright, airy studio, the smell of turpentine and oil paint filling the air. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the dozen or so canvases that lined the walls. Her paintings. They were vibrant, full of life, a mix of Seoul's urban energy and the quiet strength of the Korean landscape. It was her first solo exhibition. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was an artist. The gallery was buzzing with people, but her eyes found him immediately. He stood near the back, watching her, a quiet, proud smile on his face. His hair had a few more strands of silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes were deeper. But he looked at peace. He looked happy. The war for the soul of the Jangsa group was ongoing, but they were winning. It was now a legitimate, powerful corporation. His father had been forced into retirement, a bitter old man rattling around in his house of antiques. There were still threats, still dangers, but they were the dangers of boardrooms and stock markets, not back alleys. He had built a new world, a clean one, a place where she could breathe. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod of encouragement. She smiled back, a full, genuine smile that reached her eyes and filled her heart. Later, after the last of the patrons had left, he came to her. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at her painting of a single, resilient flower pushing its way through a crack in the pavement. "They loved your work," he said softly. "We did good," she corrected him, leaning back against his solid warmth. He turned her around in his arms, his expression serious. "I never asked you," he said, his voice low. "After everything, after what I was. Are you happy, Imani?" She looked up at him, at this man who had torn down his world and rebuilt it for her, at this redeemed kingpin who had found his heart. She saw his lingering insecurity, the shadow of the man he used to be, and she loved him all the more for it. She reached up and touched the faint scar above his eyebrow, a reminder of a life he had left behind. "Dae-hyun," she said, her voice full of a love that was simple and good and true. "I'm home." And as he lowered his lips to hers, in the quiet sanctuary of her art, surrounded by the beautiful world they had built together, she knew it was the truest thing she had ever said. This story teaches us that love is not about finding a perfect person, but about inspiring and supporting the person you love to become the best version of themselves. It shows that true strength isn't about power over others, but the courage to change oneself for the better. and that even lives steeped in darkness can find their way into the light through the redemptive power of a resilient and unwavering heart. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel for more content, and sharing it with others who might appreciate it. Your support helps us continue to create these narratives. Now for our question of the day. When Imani chose to leave Daehyun, do you think she made the right choice for her principles, or should she have stayed and tried to change him from within? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for our next story, we'd love your input. Would you like to see a story about A. Min-jun, the loyal lieutenant, finding an unexpected love of his own? B. Chloe, the supportive best friend, getting into a dramatic romance with a rival of Daehyun's new company? Cast your vote in the comments section, and we'll see you in the next story.